The delivery room fell silent when my mother-in-law slid a black leather folder across my hospital blanket and said, $22 million. Sign the papers, and the twins become mine. For a second, I honestly thought the pain medication was making me hallucinate. My newborn son slept in the bassinet beside me. His sister was curled against a pink blanket, only a few feet away. And standing at the foot of my hospital bed was a woman worth hundreds of millions of dollars offering to buy my children like they were luxury collectibles. I stared at her, then at the folder, then back at her. You're joking. I never joke about business. Her voice was calm, cold, precise. The same voice she used when firing executives. The same voice that had built one of the largest private investment firms in California. Her name was Victoria Ashford, and she had spent 6 years making my life miserable. But even after everything she'd done, nothing prepared me for this. I looked toward the door. My husband Daniel had stepped out 15 minutes earlier to update family members. Now I wished he would hurry back, because I suddenly felt trapped inside the room with a woman I no longer recognized. Victoria opened the folder. Inside were legal documents, trust agreements, guardianship transfers, financial statements. Everything had already been prepared. My stomach twisted. She had planned this, not imagined it, not fantasized about it, planned it. Victoria, I said carefully, have you completely lost your mind? She folded her hands. No. Then explain why you're trying to purchase my babies. I'm trying to save them. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the alternative was screaming. Save them from what? From you. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were true. Because she believed them. For years Victoria had made it clear that I wasn't good enough for her son. I came from a middle-class family. My father taught high school history. My mother worked as a nurse. Meanwhile, Victoria lived in a $70 million estate overlooking the Pacific Ocean. To her, people like me were temporary inconveniences. Daniel had been supposed to marry someone wealthy, someone connected, someone useful. Not me. Never me. The moment Daniel proposed, Victoria declared war. And somehow, 6 years later, we had ended up here. In a hospital room, with $22 million on the table, and my children being treated like acquisition targets. You need psychiatric help, I said. Her expression never changed. You misunderstand. Then help me understand. She leaned forward. The twins carry the Ashford legacy. I felt sick. They are human beings. They are heirs. No. I pointed toward the bassinets. They are babies. Victoria sighed. The way people sigh when speaking to someone hopelessly ignorant. I built an empire from nothing. One day that empire requires leadership. You have Daniel. He disappointed me. I froze. Those 4 words carried years of bitterness. Daniel had refused to join the family company. Instead, he became a civil engineer. A decision Victoria never forgave. The twins deserve opportunities your lifestyle cannot provide. Our lifestyle? Yes. I stared. We own a home. A small home. We have savings. Modest savings. We have a happy marriage, which generates no measurable return. The room became very quiet. Then she smiled. Not warmly. Strategically. $22 million changes everything. I looked down at my sleeping son. Then my daughter. And something inside me hardened. No amount of money buys my children. Victoria closed the folder. I expected that answer. Good. This is merely the opening offer. My blood turned cold. Opening offer. Like she was negotiating a corporate merger. Not discussing human lives. At that exact moment the door opened. Daniel walked inside. The second he saw our faces, he knew something was wrong. What happened? I pointed at Victoria. Tell him. Victoria stood. Perfect posture. Perfect composure. Perfect insanity. I offered to establish legal guardianship over the twins. Daniel blinked. What? In exchange for financial compensation. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Daniel slowly turned toward his mother. You tried to buy my children? Don't be dramatic. The color drained from his face. Get out. Victoria frowned. Daniel, get out. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear flicker across her face. Not because of what he'd said, because of how he'd said it. Daniel rarely raised his voice. But when he did, People listened. Victoria picked up the folder. Think carefully. No. You haven't heard. Leave. She stared at him, then at the twins, then finally walked out. The moment the door closed, Daniel collapsed into a chair. His hands shook. I had never seen that before. Not once. Daniel! He looked at me, and suddenly I realized something. He wasn't shocked. Not completely. He looked scared, terrified, like he knew something I didn't. What aren't you telling me? His jaw tightened. Nothing. That's a lie. He looked away, and in that moment I knew our nightmare had only just begun. 3 days later we brought the twins home. Emma and Noah, 7 pounds each. Healthy. Beautiful. Perfect. For 48 hours I almost convinced myself the hospital incident was over. Then a black SUV parked across the street, and stayed there. All day. The next morning it was back. So was another vehicle. Daniel watched from the kitchen window. His face grew pale. You recognize them? He nodded. Security. Who's security? I already knew. Mom's. The coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. You've got to be kidding. I wish I was. I looked outside. 2 men sat inside the SUV. Watching. Waiting. Monitoring. Why? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel! Finally he sighed. Because when Mom wants something, she doesn't stop. A chill crawled through me. She's spying on us. Probably. I stared at him. How is this not completely insane? Because you've only seen the public version of Victoria. That statement changed everything. I sat down. Tell me. Daniel rubbed his eyes. Then he told me a story I'd never heard before. A story about his father. Officially, Richard Ashford died from a heart attack 12 years earlier. Simple. Tragic. Straightforward. At least that's what everyone believed. But according to Daniel, the truth was far darker. His father had wanted to sell his shares in Victoria's company. He planned to leave, retire, travel, escape the endless obsession with wealth. Victoria refused. The marriage deteriorated. Arguments escalated. Lawyers became involved. Then Richard died. Suddenly. Unexpectedly. Conveniently. I stared. You think she killed him? No. Then what? Daniel hesitated. I think she destroyed him. That answer somehow felt worse. She controlled everything. His voice grew quiet. Friends. Finances. Relationships. Every decision. The more he talked, the more terrified I became. Because I wasn't dealing with a difficult mother-in-law. I was dealing with someone who viewed human beings as assets. Something to own. Manage. Control. And now she wanted my children. The next month became a living nightmare. Private investigators followed us. Anonymous complaints were filed against us. Child services showed up twice. Both complaints were false. Both complaints disappeared. But the message was clear. Victoria was testing defenses, looking for weaknesses, searching for leverage. Then came the first real attack. One afternoon, Daniel walked into the house, looking like he'd seen a ghost. What happened? I got fired. My stomach dropped. What? They eliminated my position. That makes no sense. I know. Within 2 weeks, 3 job offers mysteriously vanished. Companies stopped returning calls. Interviews were canceled. Recruiters disappeared. And every time we got close to stability, another door slammed shut. Victoria wasn't targeting our children anymore. She was targeting us, making us vulnerable, making us desperate, making $22 million look attractive. But she miscalculated one thing. Desperate people don't always surrender. Sometimes they fight. And that's when I made the decision that eventually cost Victoria everything. I started digging. Not into her family. Not into her personal life. Into her empire. Because nobody becomes worth hundreds of millions without leaving footprints. And Victoria Ashford had spent 40 years leaving footprints everywhere. The first clue came from an old employee named Marcus, a retired accountant, 70 years old, divorced, living quietly in Arizona. At first he refused to talk. Then I mentioned Victoria. His expression changed instantly, like he'd remembered a nightmare. What do you want to know? Everything. He laughed. You don't have enough time. Then he told me something that changed the entire game. Victoria's fortune wasn't as secure as people believed. Publicly, she appeared untouchable. Privately, she relied on a complex network of partnerships, debt structures, and shell companies. One major disruption could trigger chaos. Why are you telling me this? Marcus looked at me carefully. Because 30 years ago she ruined my life. And suddenly I realized something important. Victoria had enemies. Lots of them. She'd simply spent decades crushing them individually. Nobody had ever united them. Until now. And the more people I found, the uglier the story became. Former partners, former executives, former investors. Everywhere I looked there were people carrying scars with Victoria's fingerprints on them. One lost a company. One lost a marriage. One lost a retirement fund. One spent years fighting lawsuits. Individually, they couldn't touch her. Together, that was different. Very different. And that's when I discovered the secret that would eventually reduce her fortune to zero. Not through theft. Not through fraud. Through truth. Because hidden beneath Victoria's empire was a disaster waiting to explode. And I was the first person stubborn enough to uncover it. The first time I saw the documents, I thought they had to be fake. Not exaggerated. Not misleading. Fake. Because there was no way someone as calculating as Victoria Ashford could make a mistake this big. Yet there it was, buried inside thousands of pages of financial records. A ticking bomb. And somehow nobody had noticed it. Or maybe they had. Maybe they were simply too scared to talk. I sat at our dining room table at 2 a.m. while Emma and Noah slept upstairs. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness. Daniel sat across from me, half asleep, coffee in hand. Tell me again what we're looking at. I rotated the screen. He stared at the spreadsheet, then frowned, then stared harder. Wait! Yeah. His eyes widened. No way. That's what I said. The issue wasn't illegal. At least not directly. That was what made it so dangerous. Victoria's empire depended on debt. Massive debt. Most wealthy people borrowed money. That wasn't unusual. But Victoria had taken things much further. She had leveraged nearly everything she owned. Properties, businesses, commercial developments, private equity holdings, even future revenue projections. The entire empire was balanced like a skyscraper standing on toothpicks. As long as investors trusted her, everything worked. The second confidence disappeared. Everything collapsed. Daniel leaned back slowly. How much? I swallowed. More than 600 million. He nearly dropped his coffee. 600. That's just what we found so far. The room went silent. Victoria's public net worth was estimated around 400 million. But hidden underneath were obligations nobody outside her inner circle understood. Suddenly her obsession with controlling everything made sense. She wasn't protecting power. She was protecting a carefully constructed illusion. And if the illusion broke, the lenders would panic. The investors would panic. The board would panic. Everyone would run for the exits simultaneously. I should have felt excited. Instead, I felt terrified. Because exposing something this large meant going to war with someone who had spent her entire life winning. And Victoria had no problem destroying people. I already knew that firsthand. The next morning my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. A woman's voice answered. I hear you're asking questions about Victoria. Every muscle in my body tightened. Who is this? My name is Olivia Grant. The name meant nothing. Until she continued. I was her attorney. Now I was listening. What do you want? To meet. Why? A pause. Then 4 words. Because she ruined me. 3 days later, I met Olivia in a small cafe outside Sacramento. She arrived wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Not exactly the look I expected from a former corporate attorney. When she sat down, she looked over both shoulders before speaking. You're being watched. I nearly laughed. Tell me something I don't know. She didn't smile. I'm serious. That wiped the amusement from my face. Olivia removed a folder from her bag. Thick. Heavy. Worn from use. I kept copies. My heart started pounding. Copies of what? Everything. I stared. You stole company records. I preserved evidence. Evidence of what? Her eyes locked onto mine. Fraud. The word landed like a grenade. Suddenly the noise of the cafe disappeared. The conversations around us faded. All I could hear was my heartbeat. Olivia pushed the folder toward me. I spent 11 years protecting Victoria. She paused. Then I realized she wasn't protecting the company. What was she protecting? Herself. I opened the folder. The first few pages made no sense. Corporate transfers, partnership agreements, asset reallocations. Then I reached the highlighted sections, and my stomach dropped. The company had been moving money between subsidiaries to inflate valuations, artificially increasing asset worth, creating the appearance of growth. At first glance, everything looked legitimate, until you followed the paper trail. Then the entire structure began to unravel. Why didn't you report this? Olivia laughed bitterly. Because I was stupid. No. Yes. Her voice cracked. I believed loyalty mattered. That sentence carried years of regret. For a moment I saw something unexpected. Not a lawyer. Not a whistleblower. Just another victim. Someone Victoria had used and discarded. The same pattern. Over and over. Different people. Same outcome. Why now? I asked. Olivia looked away. My son died last year. The words hit me hard. I'm sorry. He was 21. Silence. Then she continued. When you lose the most important person in your life, fear stops controlling you. I didn't know what to say, so I simply listened. I spent years protecting a monster. She pushed the folder closer. I'm done. That night Daniel and I reviewed every page. By sunrise neither of us had slept. Because Olivia wasn't exaggerating. The evidence was devastating. And it explained something that had bothered me for months. Why Victoria wanted the twins so badly. The answer had nothing to do with love, or legacy, or family. It was survival. The Ashford empire was already cracking. Victoria knew it. She just hadn't told anyone, including her investors, including her board, including the financial press. She needed a successor, a symbol, a future, something that reassured everyone the dynasty would continue. The twins weren't grandchildren. They were insurance, brand assets, public relations tools, future headlines, future shareholders, future leverage. The realization made me physically ill. I looked upstairs toward the nursery, toward two innocent babies sleeping peacefully, and for the first time I understood the truth. Victoria never loved them. She loved what they represented. The attack came a week later, and it nearly worked. I was pushing the twins through a grocery store parking lot when a woman approached. Late 30s, friendly smile, professional appearance. At first she seemed normal. Then she said my name. I froze. Sarah! Yes. She smiled. I'm Rebecca. I didn't recognize her, but she clearly expected me to. Then she glanced toward the twins. They're beautiful. Alarm bells started ringing. Every parent knows the feeling. That instinct. That warning. I tightened my grip on the stroller. Do I know you? No. The smile never changed. But Victoria does. My blood turned cold. Rebecca handed me an envelope, then walked away. Just like that. Gone. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper. $25 million. Not 22. 25. A new offer. Below it was one handwritten sentence. Everyone has a price. I ripped the paper in half before reaching my car. Then ripped it again. And again. Until it looked like confetti. When I got home, Daniel found me shaking. Not crying. Shaking. Because for the first time I realized something terrifying. Victoria genuinely believed money solved everything. Including motherhood. Including family. Including love. She wasn't negotiating. She was confused. Confused why we kept refusing. As if our attachment to our children was irrational. As if she couldn't understand it. And people who don't understand love are dangerous. Because they don't understand limits. 3 weeks later the first domino fell. A financial journalist published an article questioning one of Victoria's largest developments. Nothing major. Just questions. Small concerns. Minor discrepancies. The kind of article that normally disappears in 24 hours. This one didn't. Because the questions were valid. Investors noticed. Analysts noticed. Lenders noticed. And suddenly people started looking closer. Much closer. Victoria responded immediately. Press releases. Interviews. Statements. Assurances. Everything was fine. Everything was stable. Everything was under control. But panic has a smell. And experienced investors can detect it instantly. The more Victoria reassured everyone, the more nervous they became. Then another article appeared. Then another. Then another. Within a month, the financial media started circling. And for the first time in decades, Victoria Ashford was losing control of the narrative. The woman who controlled rooms with a single sentence suddenly found herself answering questions she couldn't silence. Questions backed by documents. Questions backed by evidence. Questions backed by truth. And truth is stubborn. Once released, it refuses to go back inside the box. But Victoria wasn't finished. Not even close. Because when she realized her empire was in danger, she made a move so ruthless, so personal, that it nearly destroyed my family before her own fortune ever collapsed. And when I learned what she had done behind Daniel's back, I honestly wasn't sure our marriage would survive it. The phone call came at 6:17 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the exact time because it was the moment my entire world tilted sideways. Emma was crying upstairs. Noah had just fallen asleep on my chest. Daniel was in the shower, and my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I would have ignored it. Thank God I didn't. Mrs. Ashford? Yes. My name is Detective Ramirez. The room suddenly felt colder. We need you to come downtown. My heart stopped. Why? There was a pause. Then words I'll never forget. Your husband has been accused of embezzlement. I nearly dropped the phone. What? I'm sorry, ma'am. No. I stood up. No, that's impossible. We need you to come in. The call ended, and for several seconds I simply stood there staring at the wall, unable to process what I'd just heard. Then Daniel walked into the kitchen. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. What happened? I couldn't even form the sentence. Eventually I managed to whisper. The police think you stole money. 3 hours later we sat inside an interrogation room. The accusation was absurd. According to investigators, nearly $3 million had disappeared from a municipal infrastructure project Daniel managed 2 years earlier. Someone had created fake approval signatures, fake invoices, fake transfers, fake accounting records, and every trail pointed directly to him. The detective slid photographs across the table. Bank transfers, approval documents, digital records. On paper it looked devastating. Daniel stared at the evidence, then slowly shook his head. I didn't do this. I know what innocent people usually say. The detective folded his arms. They say exactly that. Daniel looked exhausted. Not angry. Not defensive. Just stunned. Then he pointed toward one document. Look at the timestamp. The detective frowned. What about it? That signature was submitted at 3:12 p.m. So, I was on a flight to Denver. The detective paused. Daniel continued. I have boarding passes. The room became quiet. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on the detective's face. And suddenly I understood exactly what had happened. Victoria. This had Victoria written all over it. Not because the accusation was believable. Because it was strategic. She didn't need Daniel convicted. She only needed him distracted, damaged, discredited, long enough to break us, long enough to force us into a corner, long enough to make us desperate. The same strategy she'd always used. Destroy credibility first. Take control later. That night I confronted Daniel. Not because I doubted him. Because something wasn't adding up. There's something you're not telling me. He looked away. The same thing he'd done in the hospital months earlier. The same thing that always happened when Victoria was involved. My stomach tightened. Daniel. Silence. Tell me. Finally he sat down. His face looked years older. And then he told me the secret he'd hidden for 7 years. The secret that explained everything. Including Victoria's obsession with our twins. Including the embezzlement accusation. Including why she refused to let us live in peace. The moment he started talking, I realized our nightmare was much bigger than I thought. My grandfather started the company. I nodded. I knew that. Everyone knew that. But Daniel shook his head. That's not the whole story. What do you mean? His voice dropped. The company wasn't supposed to belong to Mom. I froze. What? He swallowed hard, then continued. My grandfather left controlling ownership to my father. Okay. After he died, Mom somehow ended up with everything. I stared, a horrible realization forming. Are you saying she stole it? I don't know. The uncertainty in his voice terrified me. Because Daniel wasn't the type to make accusations. If he suspected something, there was usually a reason. My father believed documents were altered. I felt chills race through my body. What documents? The inheritance documents. The room became silent. Suddenly all the pieces began connecting. Richard Ashford. The mysterious death. The control. The obsession. The fear. Everything. Daniel looked at me. I found letters years ago. What letters? My father's journals. I couldn't breathe. You never told me. I was trying to protect you. I laughed bitterly. How's that working out? Neither of us smiled, because we both knew the answer. Not very well. The next revelation came from somewhere completely unexpected. Victoria's personal assistant. Her name was Linda. She'd worked for Victoria for almost 20 years. 20 years. Long enough to know where every skeleton was buried. I never expected her to contact me. Yet one evening she did. A simple text message. 3 words. We need to talk. That's it. No explanation. No details. No signature. Just 3 words. When we met 2 days later, she looked terrified. Not nervous. Terrified. Like someone expecting consequences. She sat across from me in a quiet restaurant and immediately pushed a flash drive across the table. Take it. I didn't touch it. What is it? Her voice trembled. Insurance. My pulse accelerated. Against what? Linda looked around before answering. Victoria. The restaurant suddenly felt much smaller. Much quieter. Much more dangerous. What's on it? She laughed nervously. A better question would be what's not on it. I stared at the tiny drive, no larger than my thumb. Yet somehow it looked heavier than anything I'd ever seen. Why give it to me? Linda's eyes filled with tears. Because for the first time I saw someone who wasn't motivated by revenge. Or money. Or power. Just guilt. Because I helped her. The words broke. I helped her hurt people. I said nothing. She continued. For years I told myself I was just doing my job. A tear rolled down her cheek. But eventually you run out of excuses. I finally picked up the drive. And everything changed. That night Daniel and I opened the files. Neither of us slept. Because the contents were devastating. Emails. Financial records. Recorded calls. Internal memos. Confidential discussions. Years of evidence. Years of manipulation. Years of corruption. Enough information to destroy careers. Companies. Reputations. Possibly entire institutions. But one file stood above all the others. A video. Timestamped nearly 13 years earlier. Recorded inside Victoria's office. At first the footage looked ordinary. Then Richard appeared. Daniel's father. Alive. Angry. Terrified. The argument started immediately. You altered the agreement. Victoria remained seated. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. I protected the company. You stole it. Silence. Then Victoria leaned forward and spoke words that would eventually destroy her. No one will ever believe you. The recording ended shortly afterward, but it didn't need to continue. The damage was already done. For 13 years that video had remained hidden. For 13 years Victoria's greatest secret sat buried in a forgotten archive. Now it was sitting on my laptop, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a path forward. A real path. Not survival. Victory. But Victoria wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the next morning something happened that none of us expected. Something so cruel, so calculated, so personal, that even Daniel broke. And I'd never seen Daniel break. Not once. Not when he lost jobs. Not when investigators questioned him. Not when reporters started digging through our lives. Not even when his own mother tried buying our children. But this was different. When the front door opened at 8:04 a.m., a process server was standing outside, and in his hands was a court filing, a petition, filed by Victoria Ashford, seeking custody of Emma and Noah, claiming Daniel and I were financially unstable, mentally unfit, and incapable of providing a proper future. I watched my husband read the papers, then read them again, then slowly sit down, his hands trembling. For several seconds, he simply stared at the floor. And then I saw something I never thought I'd see. Daniel cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man who had finally reached his limit. And in that moment, watching the strongest person I knew fall apart, I made a promise. No matter what it cost, no matter how long it took, no matter how powerful Victoria was, I wasn't stopping until her empire was gone. Every company, every asset, every illusion, every dollar. Because if she wanted a war over my children, she was about to discover exactly how dangerous a mother could be. And by the time I was finished, $22 million would seem like pocket change compared to what she was going to lose. The day Victoria filed for custody was the day I stopped seeing her as family. Until then, some small part of me had still hoped there was a misunderstanding buried underneath the madness. Maybe grief, maybe loneliness, maybe some twisted attempt at love. The custody filing destroyed that illusion. Because love doesn't try to separate children from their parents. Control does. And Victoria Ashford had become addicted to control. 3 days later we entered family court. I hadn't slept. Neither had Daniel. The twins were with my parents. Our lawyer, Michael Reyes, looked exhausted before proceedings even started. That alone scared me. Michael wasn't the type to show emotion. 20 years of litigation had turned him into a human poker face. Yet that morning he looked genuinely concerned. "What's wrong?" I asked. He lowered his voice. "Victoria hired Harrison Cole." I didn't recognize the name. Daniel did. His face immediately went pale. "Seriously?" Michael nodded. My stomach dropped. "Who's Harrison Cole?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "The guy billionaires hire when they absolutely need to win." Wonderful. Exactly what every mother wants to hear before a custody hearing. Victoria arrived 10 minutes later. Perfectly dressed. Perfect posture. Perfect confidence. She looked less like a grandmother and more like someone attending a board meeting. 2 assistants followed behind her. 3 attorneys. A security detail. The entire performance was intentional. Power. Status. Influence. Everything designed to intimidate. When her eyes met mine, she smiled. Not warmly. Like a chess player who thought she'd already won. I smiled back. For the first time since this nightmare began. Because she still had no idea what we knew. The hearing lasted 6 hours, and it was one of the most disgusting experiences of my life. Victoria's legal team attacked everything. Our finances, our home, our careers, our parenting, our marriage. Nothing was off limits. At one point, Harrison actually stood in court and argued that Emma and Noah would have greater opportunities under Victoria's care. As if children were investment portfolios. As if love could be measured on a spreadsheet. I wanted to scream. Instead, I listened. Because Michael had given me strict instructions. Stay calm. Stay patient. Let them talk. So I did. And the more they talked, the worse they looked. Especially Victoria. Because beneath her polished image was a fundamental problem. She genuinely didn't understand normal people. When questioned about why she wanted custody, she said, "I can provide superior outcomes." The judge frowned. "What does that mean?" Victoria answered immediately. "Better education. Better health care. Better social positioning." Not once did she mention love. Not once did she mention family. Not once did she mention emotional well-being. Just outcomes. Assets. Advantages. Returns. The judge noticed. Everyone noticed. Including the reporters sitting in the back row. For the first time, Victoria looked disconnected from reality, and public perception began shifting. The next breakthrough happened completely by accident. 2 weeks later, at 11:43 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Again. Normally I ignore those calls. Not anymore. "Hello." A man's voice answered. I worked for Ashford Capital. I sat upright instantly. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants revenge." "Interesting. Why?" Silence. Then, "Because Victoria destroyed my brother." I grabbed a pen. "What do you have?" His answer changed everything. "A witness." 3 days later we met inside a rented conference room. The man introduced himself as Kevin. Former financial analyst. Former Ashford employee. Former loyalist. His brother had committed suicide 9 years earlier after being blamed for a financial disaster he didn't create. According to Kevin, Victoria needed a scapegoat. His brother was convenient. The story sounded horrible, but unfortunately believable. Then Kevin opened his laptop and showed us proof. Emails. Internal discussions. Executive communications. Enough evidence to reveal exactly what happened. Victoria had knowingly shifted responsibility onto an innocent employee to protect herself. The resulting scandal ruined his career, destroyed his marriage, destroyed his life. 3 years later he was dead. Daniel sat silently while reviewing the records. Eventually he looked up. How many people? Kevin frowned. What? How many people has she done this to? Kevin laughed sadly. The kind of laugh that contains no happiness. Honestly, yes. More than you can imagine. That answer haunted me, because by then I had spoken to dozens of people. Every conversation revealed the same pattern. Different circumstances. Same ending. Victoria won. Everyone else paid. The numbers became impossible to ignore. 20 years of lawsuits, financial disputes, destroyed partnerships, silenced whistleblowers, bankrupted competitors, discredited employees, broken families. Every road led back to the same person. The same ambition. The same obsession. Control. Then came the leak. The first major leak. And it detonated like a bomb. One of the financial journalists investigating Ashford Capital obtained internal records. Nobody ever confirmed how. Nobody needed to. The resulting articles spread across every major business publication within hours. Investors panicked. Board members demanded meetings. Analysts downgraded company forecasts. Stock valuations connected to Victoria's holdings dropped sharply. And suddenly lenders started asking uncomfortable questions. Questions Victoria couldn't answer. At least not honestly. For the first time in decades, she wasn't controlling the conversation. She was reacting to it. And Victoria hated reacting. The next month was absolute chaos. News vans parked outside Ashford headquarters. Shareholders demanded transparency. Former employees began speaking publicly. Anonymous sources multiplied. Investigations expanded. Every day brought a new headline. Every headline made things worse. Meanwhile, the custody case remained active. Victoria refused to withdraw it, even while her empire burned around her, because she believed she'd eventually regain control. She always had before. This time was different. This time the damage wasn't isolated. The damage was everywhere. Then something happened nobody expected, including me. Victoria called. Personally. No assistants. No lawyers. No intermediaries. Just Victoria, the woman herself. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But curiosity won. Hello. Her voice sounded different. Older. Tired. For the first time ever. Human. I'd like to meet. I stared at the phone. What for? To talk. I laughed. After everything she'd done, she wanted to talk? Unbelievable. Yet part of me needed answers. Needed closure. Needed to understand how someone became this way. So against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a private restaurant overlooking the ocean. The same place where Daniel proposed to me years earlier. The location wasn't accidental. Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. When I arrived, she was already waiting. Alone. No security. No attorneys. No assistants. Just her. And for the first time in 6 years, she looked vulnerable. Not weak. Just tired, as though carrying a weight nobody else could see. We sat across from each other, neither speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. You're winning. I almost laughed. Because if she only knew how much bigger the storm was about to become. Is that why I'm here? No. She looked out toward the ocean. Then back at me. You remind me of someone. That caught me off guard. Who? Her answer surprised me. Myself. I blinked. Of all the things I expected, that wasn't one of them. Victoria smiled sadly. The younger version. I stared, trying to reconcile those words with the woman sitting across from me. The woman who tried buying my children. The woman who destroyed lives. The woman currently fighting for custody. Nothing made sense. Then she said something even stranger. I wasn't always like this. And for the first time, I believed her. Because monsters aren't born monsters. They become them. Somewhere along the way. Through choices. Through fears. Through ambition. Through wounds that never heal. The problem wasn't whether Victoria had once been good. The problem was that she'd stopped. Years ago. And now the consequences were finally arriving. But neither of us knew that within 48 hours, the single biggest secret in Ashford history would become public. The video. The inheritance fraud. Richard's accusations. Everything. And when it happened, Victoria's empire wouldn't just crack. It would collapse completely, because the one group she still depended on, the board of directors, was about to discover the truth she'd hidden for 13 years. And when powerful people realize they've been lied to, they don't forgive. 46 hours after my meeting with Victoria, her empire began collapsing in real time. Not slowly, not gradually, all at once, like a skyscraper whose foundation had finally given way. And it started with a 12-minute video. The same video hidden on Linda's flash drive. The one showing Richard Ashford accusing Victoria of altering inheritance documents. The one she had spent 13 years burying. The one she thought nobody would ever see. She was wrong. The video leaked at 8:02 a.m. on a Monday. By 8:15, every major business reporter in California had it. By 9 o'clock, national media picked it up. By noon, it was everywhere. Television, financial websites, social media, news channels, podcasts, legal analysts, everyone. The footage wasn't technically proof of fraud, but it was devastating because it raised questions, serious questions, questions investors hate, questions board members hate, questions lenders hate even more. And once those questions started, they multiplied. Fast. I was feeding Noah when my phone exploded with notifications. Text after text. Call after call. News alert after news alert. Daniel walked into the kitchen, holding his tablet. His face looked stunned. It's everywhere. I looked at the screen. Victoria's picture filled every headline, every article, every discussion, every financial segment. And for the first time in my life, Victoria wasn't controlling the narrative. The narrative was controlling her. By that afternoon, Ashford Capital's board called an emergency meeting. Then another. Then another. The company issued statements. Investors demanded explanations. Law firms announced investigations. Financial regulators started asking questions. The pressure became unbearable. Yet somehow Victoria still believed she could survive it. Because Victoria had survived everything. For 40 years she had bullied, manipulated, negotiated, intimidated, and outmaneuvered her way through every crisis. This one felt different. But she couldn't accept that. Not yet. The call came that evening. Not from Victoria. From Linda. And she sounded terrified. They know. My stomach tightened. Who? The board. I sat up straighter. What happened? Linda laughed nervously. The video wasn't the problem. What do you mean? Someone started digging. A chill ran through me. Because that was exactly what Victoria had feared. The video itself wasn't fatal. The investigation it triggered was, once people started looking, they found things. A lot of things. Transactions, transfers, agreements, valuations, records. Questions led to answers. Answers led to evidence. Evidence led to panic. And panic spread faster than any virus. 3 days later, Victoria lost her position as CEO. I honestly didn't believe it when I first heard. Victoria Ashford, removed from the company she'd controlled for decades. It felt impossible. Then the official announcement came. And suddenly it was real. The board had voted. Unanimously. She was out. The woman who built the empire was no longer allowed to run it. I expected celebration. Instead I felt something strange. Sadness. Because no matter what she'd done, watching someone lose everything is painful. Especially when they spent their entire life believing it could never happen. Daniel felt it too. We sat on our back porch after the twins fell asleep. Neither of us spoke for a while. Eventually he broke the silence. She's still my mother. I nodded, because that was the tragedy. No matter how much damage she'd caused, no matter how much pain she'd inflicted, she was still his mother. And nothing changes that. Not lawsuits, not scandals, not betrayal, nothing. A week later things got worse. Much worse. The lenders started pulling out. One after another. Then 5 more. Debt obligations were triggered. Assets were frozen. Partnerships dissolved. Investors fled. The structure Marcus had warned us about finally cracked. And once it cracked, it shattered. Because the empire had never been as strong as it appeared. It was confidence. Perception. Momentum. The second those disappeared, everything else followed. I remember watching financial analysts explain it on television. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of millions in obligations. dozens of interconnected entities, massive exposure. The more experts examined the structure, the uglier it became. Years of leverage, years of risk, years of hidden vulnerabilities, all exposed at once, and every hour made things worse. Then came the moment that shocked everyone, including me. Victoria withdrew the custody case. Just like that. No conditions, no negotiations, no appeals. Gone. The filing simply disappeared. When Michael called to tell us, I thought I'd misheard. She's dropping it. Completely. Why? Michael paused, then sighed. Because she has bigger problems. I couldn't argue with that. But what happened next surprised me even more. Victoria called again. This time I almost didn't answer. Almost. Eventually, curiosity won. Again. Her voice sounded different. Not tired. Broken. Can we meet? I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me never wanted to hear her voice again. Instead I said, "Where?" The meeting took place inside a small cafe. No ocean view. No luxury. No private room. No security. Just a quiet corner table. And when Victoria walked in, I barely recognized her. The expensive confidence was gone. The perfect image was gone. Even her posture looked different. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked like an ordinary woman. A lonely one. She sat down slowly. Neither of us spoke. Finally she looked at me, then said something I never expected. "I'm sorry. I honestly thought I'd misheard." Victoria Ashford. Apologizing. The woman who spent years believing she was always right. The woman who viewed apologies as weakness. The woman who tried buying my children. And yet there she was, saying the words, "I'm sorry." Tears filled her eyes. Real tears. Not manipulation. Not strategy. Regret. Pure regret. I thought I was protecting everything. Her voice cracked. But I destroyed everything. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to stop." And suddenly I understood something. Victoria's greatest prison wasn't losing her fortune. It was never learning how to live without control. Months passed. The investigations continued. The lawsuits multiplied. Assets were sold. Properties disappeared. Businesses changed hands. And eventually the impossible happened. Victoria's fortune hit zero. Not exactly zero on paper. But effectively, everything meaningful was gone. The empire she'd spent 40 years building no longer belonged to her. The board was gone. The power was gone. The influence was gone. The control was gone. And in the end, that hurt her more than losing money ever could. One evening nearly a year later, I received a letter. Handwritten. Simple. No lawyers. No assistants. No corporate stationery. Just a letter. From Victoria. Inside was a photograph. Emma and Noah. The picture had been taken during a supervised family visit months earlier. On the back she had written one sentence. "Thank you for protecting them from becoming me." I stared at those words for a long time. Longer than I'd like to admit. Because after everything, every lawsuit, every threat, every betrayal, every nightmare, those words felt honest. Maybe for the first time in her life. Today Emma and Noah are 7 years old. Healthy, happy, loud. They fill our home with chaos every single day. Daniel returned to engineering. We moved to a new town. Built a quiet life. A normal life. The kind Victoria never understood. The kind she spent decades sacrificing in pursuit of something bigger. And that's the irony. Because in the end, the $22 million she offered me was worth less than what I already had. A family. A husband who stood beside me. Children who ran into my arms every morning. A life filled with love instead of control. Victoria spent her life chasing power. I spent mine protecting people. Only one of those investments paid off. And every time I watch Emma and Noah laughing in the backyard, I remember the day she slid that folder across my hospital bed. $22 million. For my children. The biggest offer of my life. And the easiest rejection I ever made. Because some things don't have a price. And the moment Victoria finally learned that lesson, she had already lost everything.